Christmas is supposed to be a time of joy and merriment, a time to spend with family and friends. But sometimes that joy can turn into tragedy. Even worse for some, they never receive a clear conclusion why such tragedy took place. Today, we will be looking at 3 Christmas time tragedies which have remained unsolved. Let us begin. Life seemed to be going well for 19-year-old Rhonda Hinson in December 1981. Earlier that year, she had graduated from high school in Valdez, North Carolina, and had just started working as a clerical worker for a steel company. On 22nd December, she attended the company's Christmas party. At about midnight, she left the party, dropping off 2 friends before setting off home. Not long after, Rhonda's car was found in the ditch just half a mile from her house. Just a few feet away was her lifeless body. She was lying on her back with her arms by her side, almost as if she had been deliberately placed there. Investigations found she had been killed by a single bullet from a high-powered rifle, which had been shot through the back of her car, passing through the trunk, back seat and her own seat, piercing her heart. A shot which would have killed her instantly. Initially, officials thought Rhonda's murder was a random act of violence, but as investigations continued, it became more obvious that it was a planned attack by someone who knew her. Her parents recalled how in the weeks leading to her death, Rhonda's behaviour had changed. She had begun to ask her father to accompany her on trips into town, and asked her mother about dating a married man. She would get up in the middle of the night and shower, claiming she felt dirty. Police asked for witnesses to come forward, and what they discovered seemed to suggest that Rhonda was being stalked that night. Between 12:15 and 12:30 am, around 30 minutes before the shot was fired, a witness saw a blue Chevelle parked next to the off-ramp Rhonda used, just 200 yards from where she would be found. The witness said she saw 2 white males sitting in the car. Another witness reported seeing this car speeding away from the scene half an hour later, with just 1 male. Rhonda's car was already in the ditch at this time, and as he drove past, he saw a woman slumped over the wheel and a white male standing next to the door. Assuming they were just a drunk couple, the witness continued driving. Unable to provide much more information, the witness underwent hypnosis. He was able to provide a more thorough description of the blue Chevelle as a 70s model with a messed up front end. He was also able to give a basic description of the man standing next to Rhonda's car as between 5'10" and 6 foot and medium built. He was also able to recall a second vehicle parked nearby, a black or dark blue Trans Am. Investigators found prints on the door which they believe belonged to the killer, but were never able to identify them. 30 years later, DNA testing on Rhonda's sweater found traces of male DNA, but were again unable to identify a match. No official suspects have ever been named in the case, and theories range from a mere accident to a planned attack and cover-up. Due to a lack of evidence, the case has gone cold and remains unsolved 36 years later. On Christmas Day 1996, Patty Vaughan left her home and was never seen again. In 1985, she had married J.R. Vaughan and had 3 children with him. In October 1996, they began a trial separation, with J.R. moving into an apartment in San Antonio, Texas, and Patty remaining at their home in Lavernia, Texas, with the children. Not long after, she began to date a former boyfriend, something J.R. found about on 13th December. On Christmas Day, Patty had spent the day with J.R. and his family and the children at her home. J.R. and Patty had an argument, after which Patty left the home and was never seen or heard from again. The next day, on 26th December, J.R. filed for divorce. The same day, Patty's van was found abandoned 15 miles from the house. The tyres had been intentionally deflated, and a pile of men's clothes were found inside, including a red workman's jumpsuit. Investigators also found traces of blood in the van, as well as in Patty's bedroom and on a mop in the home. DNA testing showed that the blood belonged to Patty. Beyond this, there is no further information or evidence as to what happened to Patty. JR is considered to be the prime suspect in the case, but there is not considerable enough evidence for a charge to be made. At the time of the disappearance, he was working on the construction of a school in Natalia, Texas. Investigators searched the site but found nothing. Soon after, JR moved to Colorado with the children and refused to let Patty's family see them. In 2005, he had Patty legally declared dead. In a bizarre twist, in 2012, DNA testing on items found in Patty's van found blood DNA for a female not related to Patty. Today, there have been no arrests made in relation to the disappearance and no trace of where she may be or who the other female might be. George Sodder was born in Sardinia in 1895 and immigrated to the United States in 1908. After spending a few years working on the railroads in Pennsylvania, he moved to Smithers, West Virginia to work as a driver before starting his own trucking company. There, he met Jenny Cipriani, a fellow Italian immigrant who he later married. They moved into a 2-story timber frame house in Fayetteville, West Virginia, which had a large population of Italian immigrants. In 1923, they had their first child, John. Between then and 1943, they had 9 more: Joe, Marion, George Jr., Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty, and Sylvia. The business prospered, and the family became one of the most respected around. But George's strong opinions on certain subjects and his criticism of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini led to arguments within the community. At some point, Joe joined the military to serve during World War II. In October 1945, things began to change. Mussolini had been deposed and executed, but George's comments had still left some hard feelings. A life insurance salesman visited the house and, after being declined by George, remarked, "Your house will go up in smoke. Your children are going to be destroyed," blaming all the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini. Another visitor said that 2 fuse boxes at the back of the house would cause a fire someday, puzzling George since he had just had the house rewired and declared safe by the local electric company. The older sons also noticed a strange car watching the younger children as they returned home from school. On the night of Christmas Eve 1945, the family was celebrating. The younger children asked their mother if they could stay up later, which she agreed to as long as Maurice and Louis finished their chores before bed. George, John and George Jr. were already asleep, and at 10 p.m, Jenny put Sylvia up to bed and went to sleep herself. At 12:30, she was woken by the telephone ringing. When she answered it, there was a female voice she didn't recognise, asking for someone she didn't know. There was laughter and clinking glasses in the background. After hanging up, she saw the light in the living room was still on, and the curtains hadn't been drawn. Marion was asleep on the couch, but there was no sign of the others. Jenny assumed they had gone up to the attic where they slept and went back to bed, but was woken again at 1 a.m. by something landing on the roof, then rolling down. Hearing nothing more, she went back to sleep, but was woken again half an hour later to the smell of smoke. Noticing the house was on fire, particularly around the fuse box and telephone line, she alerted her husband and children, but when they got out, George and Jenny noticed only John, Marion, George Jr. and Sylvia had got out, with the rest presumably still inside. George and his sons tried to reach the attic, but the stairway was already ablaze. A ladder that rested against the side of the house was missing, and the trucks wouldn't start. The fire brigade did not turn up until later in the morning, leaving the family to simply watch as their house burnt down, presumably with the 5 children still inside. When firefighters and the police eventually turned up, they found no bones, but concluded that this was to be expected. Despite being told to leave the site alone for a more thorough inspection, George covered the site with 5 foot of dirt 4 days later, intending to convert it into a memorial garden. The next day, an inquest claimed the fire was an accident caused by faulty wiring. One of the jurors was the insurance salesman who had threatened the family. But this was not the end of the tale. Several twists began to occur, which led the family to become convinced that not only was the fire not an accident, but that the children were still alive. The family questioned why, if there was a fault with the electrics, why the electrics still worked during the fire. The missing ladder, which was usually against the side of the house, was found 75 feet away. Neighbours reported seeing a man taking the ladder and cut the telephone line shortly before the fire. This man was found and fined for theft. A bus driver claimed to have seen people throwing fireballs at the house. A few months after the fire, Sylvia found a small hard rubber-like ball nearby, which George said reminded him of a pineapple bomb. Some witnesses claimed to have seen the children. One said she saw them peering out of a window of a passing car during the fire. Another claimed to have served them breakfast at a rest stop the next morning between Fayetteville and Charleston. She also noticed a car with Florida license plates in the parking lot. The family decided to hire C.C. Tinsley, a private investigator. He discovered that Fire Chief F.J. Morris had found a heart, despite reporting that no remains had been found. George and Tinsley confronted him and he showed them where it was buried. Analysis showed that it was actually a fresh beef liver, which has not been subjected to fire. Excavations on the site in 1949 found small bone fragments thought to be from a human vertebrae. These were sent to Marshall T. Newman at the Smithsonian Institute, who not only determined that they were possibly from someone too old to have been one of the children, also said there was no sign of exposure to fire, and that a fire like the one that destroyed the Sodder house should have left full skeletons. George Sodder continued to follow any tips and leads. The oddest came in 1967, when they received a letter postmarked in Central City, Kentucky, containing a photo of a young man around 30. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil Boys, A90132 or 35. The family thought the man bore a resemblance to Louis. They hired another private detective, but after he left Central City, they never heard from him again and were unable to locate him. George continued searching until his death in 1969 and Jenny until hers in 1989. They never received closure over what really happened to their children that night. Even today, what really happened on Christmas Eve 1945 is unsolved. Did the children really perish in the fire, or were they taken? And even if they did die, was the fire really an accident or an act of revenge over what many felt were vile comments about the former Italian leader? With so many years passing and almost everyone involved that night now dead, we will most likely never get an answer. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a like and share. If you would like to see more, then please subscribe. I also have a Patreon, where you can help support this channel in return for a variety of rewards, including early access to videos and the opportunity to help choose topics for future videos. The link can be found in the description below. Until next time, I've been Faxam, and I hope to see you again soon.